Welcome to the Data Hall YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to learn how do we concatenate variable or data, or how do we combine data from different columns. So there are different ways of doing that. The first function that we are going to work with is called paste function, and that comes from base_r. That function is loaded as you install R in your system. Then we would work with a unite unite function that comes from Tidyverse Package, and the last one is str_c, that is from Stringr Package. So let's get started. Let's load some data. So we have made these two vectors. We are going to work with vectors, and the idea that we implement on vector is easily implementable on the data frames. And I would also give you an example of working with these functions in a data frame. So we have the first name of different players, and then we have the last name of different players. And what we do is we press Control Enter, and that would make these vectors. So these are vectors and not data frames. So first thing, let's understand how do we use this function, this paste function. We write the name of the function, that is paste, and then we write the vectors that we want to combine. So in this case, we want to create a full name from the first and the last name. So the order is important. Whatever order you give, that would be implemented in the concatenation. So this would create in a new vector called full1, and that would contain the full name. So the vector had been created, and it contains 3 observations. And if we look into the vector, it would give us the full name of all the 3 players. That is Stephen Curry. That is the first name plus the second name, and they are separated by a space. Then we have a second player and the third player. Remember, I could have simply clicked over here and then press Control Enter, or I can select this object or vector and then press Control Enter, and that would give us the result of that vector. Okay, so in this case, I have just performed the default functions. So there is another similar function to paste that is called Paste0, and let me just demonstrate the difference between Paste0. We just wrote the function and then exactly the same parameters. And if I press Control Enter and then Control Enter again to look into the results of this full2 vector, you would see a difference between these 2 vectors. So when I'm using Paste0, it is not giving us the space between the first name and the last name like over here. But when I was using the paste function, the result is over here. We saw that we had this space between these first name and last name. And the reason is that with the paste function, the default separator is space, but with Paste0, there is no default separator. So the difference between Paste0 and paste is that paste contains a default separator, but Paste0 does not have any separator. So let's move forward and look into how can we change the default separator of paste. We can use the sep parameter that would be equal to comma if we want to change. So the default is space. We can also not have any spaces, and that would become equal to Paste0. Or we can have comma, and if we execute that, it would give us comma between the first name and the last name. Again, we can make a whole string out of it. And let's just say if I bring in a third variable, let's say age. Let me create a third vector over here. Let's call it age, and this would be equal to this vector, right? So let's say I want to write a sentence that the age of Stephen Curry is 32, right? The way I do that is I write the paste function, and then within inverted commas, I write the part of the sentence, that is the age of. Then after comma, I write the first name, the last name, that is I'm selecting these vectors, the first name and the last name vectors. And then after comma, I give the word is, that string is, and I select the age vector. So when I press enter, it creates another vector full for, and it contains 3 different statements. The age of Stephen Curry is 32. So it is picking up the first name, last name, and then the age from these relevant vectors. And you can see how the spaces had been put after of and then between the first name and the last name, and with the before and after the alphabet is. So we can understand that the separator, although we haven't mentioned the separator, but paste assumes a separator by default. There is another parameter called collapse, and the difference between, let me first execute this and then we would understand. I have set the separator equal to space, although if I do not do that, that is understood. And I have set collapse as equal to and. If I perform this and look into the vector, it would give me an idea. So where does this collapse comes in? It would add all these 3 different elements together using this whatever operator that we have performed in the collapse. Let's work with the data frame. So let's create a data frame. So I'm using the exact same data as I have used over here, but I'm using a data frame. So now we have a player's data frame. It contains the same data. And let me use the Tidyverse package because I'm going to use the mutate and this pipe function from the Tidyverse library. So what I do is I take the player's data frame, and then this pipe sign means, and then I pipe this data set into the next function. I'm going to mutate, and mutate means to create a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called full name. That would be equal to, and now I'm using this paste function as I did over here within this mutate. So this paste can be used within other functions from the other packages. So this would create the full name. So that was the paste function. Now let's work with the unite function, and there are certain characteristics of unite function that are not there with the paste function. And now I have already loaded this library Tidyverse, but if you haven't, you would have to load it, and if you haven't installed it, then you would have to install it. So the syntax of unite is that you write the function unite and then specify the data, that is the data frame, and then you specify the new name of the column that would be created, and then we need to specify all the columns that we want to combine, and then we can also have a separate, but that is not necessary. And by default, the separator of unite is an underscore. So let's execute this. So in this case, I'm not using exact this syntax because I'm using this pipe sign, and what it does is it takes the player data frame and it puts it as an argument at the start of this next function. So this player is assumed over here by this pipe function, right? So that is why the syntax is different from what I have just mentioned. So the name of the new variable, the first name and the last name. If I execute that, that would give us full unite. And now the difference between, you can see, is that we have combined the first name and the last name, but we have lost the first and the last name as we already had over here, right? The reason is that what this unite would do is it would combine first and last name, but would not give us these variables that we are going to combine in the final version. But there is a way around. We can use the remove parameter set equal to false, and that would obviously give us the first name and the last name in the resultant data frame. Secondly, you would notice that there is an underscore as a separator, and we might want to use the space, so we can use this space parameter. So let me, instead of executing this, let me execute this bunch of code. And now you can see that we have space because we have used the separator parameter. And we also have the first name and the last name instead of the unite deleting them by default because we have used this remote parameter. We can also remove the NA values, missing values, if we set the NA.rm equal to true. Lastly, we are going to use the str_c from the Stringr package, and that is exactly somewhat equal to Paste0 function. So the way to use is we use the Stringr, we specify the first name, the last name, the separator, because as Paste0 str_c does not assume any separator, and we can specify a collapse also. But you would notice some difference with this collapse, and the difference is that when we use the collapse with paste, it gave us different strings, right? So these inverted these text within inverted commas are different strings. But with the str_c, it would just give us a single string. So it is somewhat similar to Paste0, but it gives us a single string. So I hope that was useful. Thanks for watching this video. Do subscribe and do hit the bell icon.